I was expecting you to bring your dog tonight.
I know. I
Happened?
really forgot her, actually.
What?
We were in the car, and I turned to Susan, my publicist, and I said, I forgot Loretta. It was like leaving your car, your kid in the car or something. I totally forgot her and spaced out. So sorry she's not here.
We miss her. But tell us a little bit about wanting to tell a story that was such a celebration of the love between man and animal.
Yeah. Well, I'm a rescuer. I'm what they call a bottle feeder. So I volunteer at Lacey Street Animal Shelter, and when they have orphaned cats or dogs, they call me and other volunteers, and we feed these animals every 2 hours. So I've been doing that a lot, and my father, who this film is inspired by, was a big rescuer, and so I just thought I think anyone who has experienced a certain amount of childhood trauma surrounds themselves with animals because animals really are the only things that don't really hurt you. So I've always had an affinity for animals, and I wanted to shine a light on something that I'm incredibly passionate about, which is rescuing. So.
Tell us about your process as a writer. How do you go about kind of amassing ideas before you're ready to actually put them into screenplay form?
Um, well, with my dad, it came out of a place where I wanted to explore my relationship with him. And this was a relationship that I have always, he's my dad. He's everything to me. And I had a lot of anger towards him that I hadn't really expressed because I think when you have someone in your life that is in and out of your life, whenever they're with you, you don't want to express any anger towards them because you're afraid they'll leave. So, with my dad, I had this very kind of suppressed anger, and but I was so in love with him. I mean, he's been married 6 times. He has 6 different kids from 6 different wives, and he's incredibly charismatic. Been in and out of prison all his life for doing the craziest schemes you've ever heard of, and um, I knew I wanted to write something that felt kind of truthful to me and find my voice again after doing a trickier film before this. And so the writing process for me was just write what I know, write what I know, write what I know, try and be honest. And I wasn't honest. My first draft had no anger in it, which is not surprising to me because I'm like so out of touch with my own anger. And so I gave it to a friend, and she's like, Shauna, this is you exploring your anger. It's like there's nothing on the page, there's no anger. And so that was a really hard look in the mirror for me. So I went back and rewrote it and found my voice with that. And it was therapeutic for me. And I think, as a writer, like I'm sure there's a lot of writers in the room, you get to write your own endings. You get to write happier endings than the things you've lived, and that has always drawn me towards writing. Like that's my fantasy is I get to sit in my bedroom and fix my life. I get to, you know, um, fix all the hurts that I've had throughout my life.
Just 1 second, Heather. Can you turn our mics up a bit? Just because unless you really hold them really close to your,
Oh,
they're not
well,
they're not picking up as much as they should. Um, well, let's talk about film then as a sort of a catharsis,
yeah,
um, because uh, as much as you want to deal with emotionally in a film, the way that the movie's going to end is going to sort of signal to us the sort of the journey that you wanted us to take. And
yeah.
um, how difficult was it for you to actually put a plot, with an ending,
Uh huh.
into something that's an emotional journey that comes from your own life?
Well, lucky for me, it's mostly true. So my father did end up living with me, and I did end up seeing him. He had a second chance at parenting. So he basically helped me raise my son, who's only 5 right now, but I saw him be the parent that I never had for my son. So I knew that was my ending. I knew, and it wasn't the happy ending where our relationship is fixed and we love each other and it's all is forgotten. It was a more complicated ending. And that's what I wanted to show with Vera, that it wasn't this wildly happy ending, that there was some uncertainty and we didn't know what their relationship was going to be like. But it was a first step towards something. So lucky for me, so much of this film, as kind of zany and crazy as it is, has happened to me. So I kind of laid out my life like that. And it fit into a 3-act structure somehow.
It's interesting that you would also be sort of, writing a film about parenthood, having a son, but you're writing a fictional character. How much of that character is really sort of a reflection of your own experience?
I think that character is a lot of me, of what I was like when I was young. I was so shy that I did not speak. I had very few friends. I was incredibly awkward, and I used to raise my hand with my friends and wait for them to call on me so that I could talk. I was constantly waiting for permission to speak. And so I grew up knowing that I was a total misfit. And that's where I think a lot of me is in Henry. And it's also the son that I hope my son turns into, that's wildly creative and a little quirky and misunderstood, but is probably going to make the coolest guy at the party like when he's 25. And that's a relationship that I want. I want to be too close with my son. You know.
Tell us about casting some of these Hollywood legends
Yeah.
in your film. Um, I mean, it's first of all, I just absolutely love seeing Christopher Lloyd popping up in movies. It doesn't happen very often, and I'm like he is just as amazing as ever.
Yeah.
Uh, give us a sense. I mean, walk us through, bringing in Peter Fonda and Christopher Lloyd, and then we'll talk a little bit more about Christopher and Vera.
Well, I think Christopher Plummer was the kind of the first guy on, and after that, it just made casting everybody else so easy. I mean, everybody wants to work with Christopher Plummer. So I actually kind of had carte blanche, which I never really get on films, to just cast whoever I wanted, whoever felt right for the character. And so it didn't matter about foreign value or what what they had just done at the box office. I could really cast this really kind of odd ensemble of people who my dad was completely inappropriate with me most of the time. So whenever he would take me to do his business runs, I'd meet his friends, Tony the Ant and Blonde Joey, and these guys that had been in and out of prison for who knows what, but very wildly charismatic oddballs. And that's what I wanted to find. And so this felt like the cast as a whole felt like if you were at a party with all of these people, it would be one of the strangest parties you've ever been to, but it would be so much fun and you'd have to talk about it and tell all your friends that you had the most wild night. So I was attracted to Christopher Lloyd because I didn't see him enough. I don't see him enough. And I thought, what an amazing opportunity to put him in a movie and to get to work with this kind of icon. And there was a day on set where it was Peter Fonda, Christopher Plummer, and Christopher Lloyd. And they were all sitting together on director's chairs. And everybody on set was like secretly taking out their camera to take this picture because it was like watching like 3 unicorns together all in the same place. It was just kind of mind blowing. But it was, I feel so grateful that this is what I get to do. I feel so lucky that I'm a director and that I have the privilege of making a film, right? It doesn't happen very often. They're hard to get made. And when you do make them, you just feel so grateful and lucky. And then when you work with Christopher Plummer and Christopher Lloyd and Peter Fonda, it's just all time great. And the pinch me situation. And I feel like, when you're a director, I got to cast actors that made me look really good, made me look like a great director. They just make me look better. So it was an honor.
Well, when you bring in actors of the caliber of Vera and Christopher to play these lead roles, how much, I don't want to say freedom, but sort of like how much room to explore who the characters are, do you allow them given how personal the story is from
Yeah.
from your own life?
Oh, totally. I said, forget my father, forget me. You're not playing me, you're not playing my father. You're playing a version of them. The only thing that Christopher Plummer has in common with my father is he has this twinkle in his eye. But that's where the similarities end. And I really, I didn't want him to ever feel like I was watching him and going, "Oh, my dad doesn't walk that way," or "My dad would never say that way. He'd say it like this." Like I just felt that was too restrictive. So they knew that they were casting the roles for a reason, and I let them just become, make it themselemselves and see themselves in the roles and make it their own, especially with Vera too. I think I was so unself-aware. That's just the through line of tonight, that I didn't even really realize that Vera was playing a version of me until she told me afterwards. So even though I was dressing her in exactly the clothes that I wear.
Well, tell us a little bit about how her character came to life in ways that might have been surprising to you from the version of this movie that was still on the page into a performance with someone who's bringing her own ideas and, sort of obviously the emotion to the character.
Yeah.
How did she surprise you?
Well, I think she surprised me in that she was funny. I mean, that was one thing when I was casting this movie is you say, do I cast comedic actors or do I go with, the dramatic actors? And with Vera, I had never really seen Vera do comedy before. Not like this, not hold her own in a comedy. And so, but I knew she would nail the drama. So I think what really surprised me of Vera was her sense of humor. And I was kind of like one of those moments where you just like exhale and you're like, oh God, thank God. I could have really ruined my movie if if she wasn't funny, but she was really funny.
And was there a similar process with Christopher about sort of finding things in that character that you hadn't necessarily anticipated?
Made a lot of adjustments for Chris too,
Yeah.
because my father's in and out of prison, covered in tattoos, drives this old cargo van from El Paso, Texas. And Christopher Plummer is, this incredibly well-known Shakespearean actor and, classically trained pianist and just polar opposite of my father. And so I made some adjustments, instead of the old ratty cargo van, I had Christopher driving a Rolls Royce, and I gave him some fancy friends like Peter Fonda, which my dad would never have had. And we kind of made a little fun adjustments, but he still has the same essence as my father. And actually, there's a part in the movie, I gave my dad a cameo. My dad passed away in June, but before he did, he was in the movie and he got to do a drug deal with Christopher Plummer, which is really special. He's the guy with the handlebar mustache, and he kind of beams into the camera. So it was a really lovely way to have him be part of the film.
Tell us about casting all of the pets. What what is that process like, and how are they doing?
Yeah. I mean, that was the most fun for me. I mean, I teach at AFI, and I constantly am telling my students, like, do not work with animals, do not work with, an old ratty car, don't do any driving scenes, in multiple locations, forget about it, don't work with a minor. I mean, I broke every single rule that I tell my students. And the animals, I mean, for me, I was like, isn't this great? There's animals everywhere. It's so wonderful. We could just pet animals all day. But it was total chaos. I mean, it was complete chaos most of the time, which I actually really loved and didn't really think of as chaotic. But the animals were great because the hardest thing for us to do was to get the animals to look natural, because movie dogs are not trained to look natural. They're trained to like do a backflip or walk on their hind legs or do some like Air Bud kind of trick. But for me, I just wanted animals sleeping on a bed, and that was incredibly hard to get. So we would have to get all the animals on set, get them into the bed. Everybody would have to be completely quiet. No one would be able to talk. The crew would have to be quiet. We would all have to kind of crouch down, be really mellow, and then wait sometimes 30 to 40 minutes until each animal started laying down and closing their eyes. And then we would say, okay, action. And we would do the scene, and then an animal would pop up, and we'd have to start all over again. I mean, it was for an indie movie where you're shooting 10 pages a day. It was so ill-advised. But the casting of the animals was so fun too, because your animal wrangler, who we had a great one, Bonnie Judd. She presented like these beautiful purebred dogs to me, and I was like, I don't want any of those. I want the unadoptables, the funky looking ones, the ones with one eye or one ear, or the ones with some character. Those are the animals that I really love and wanted to be part of this. And it was also really important for me to have a pit bull in because pit bulls just get such a bad name, and they're such lovely, goofy dogs.
So, well, having had obviously, uh, car journey movie, lots of animals and a minor. What are some of the tips that you could offer? Should someone be crazy enough to try and replicate that trio of complications?
Oh gosh, the tips. I mean, the car was actually just the worst nightmare. We had two of them too, and they broke down almost every day. Daily, we were trying to get that car started again. So that's where I really would take my own advice on that one again, and not use such a shitty car. But the animals, I mean, I think the animals were really therapeutic for the actors, We would put my dog Loretta, I'm so sad I didn't bring her, I'm sorry. But I'd put her in Chris's arms, and he'd instantly relax, and he wouldn't even be thinking about his performance anymore. He would just be kind of petting this dog. Worked really well with Lewis, who was always in the back seat with most of the dogs. It helped him, I feel like, give a really naturalistic performance. So I would advise working with animals.
Is there any sort of structuring philosophy to your cinematography? Do you sit down and kind of map out how you want to, have certain things evolve as a formal technique?
Yeah, I mean, I think we had a lot of this movie storyboarded, which was, I think, when you have something like car scenes over and over again, you're thinking, how is each one of these going to look different? How are we going to not use the same exact shots for each car scene and be really repetitive with our visuals? So we actually had a really strong visual plan for this film. We wanted to shoot anamorphic, and we wanted to shoot on these really old lenses, which I think I'm always struggling to find that kind of film look. And I feel like these gave me a really nice film look, these old anamorphic lenses from like the 60s. They were pretty cool. And then, Sarah Mashara, I went to AFI with her. She's an incredible cinematographer, and I was dying to work with her. And she just her composing is just so naturalistic, and I always think I'm always in awe of cinematographers because I could look at this room and someone would ask me where I should put the camera, and I'd have a few guesses as to where it would look the most cinematic, but all the best cinematographers that I've worked with say, oh no, you'd stand right over there in that third panel and you'll get the best shot right there. Like those that just have that natural inclination to know exactly where to put the camera to be the most cinematic. I so admire that skill. It's pretty amazing.
Um, Speaking of that kind of sort of collaboration with people who have strong, interesting, creative perspectives on your film, uh, what are the other departments that you really like to sort of get into the details with?
I think I worked with Paige Buckner. He's my production designer, and I think that's with him. I really had fun because what I love about Paige is he does layers. I don't even know if you noticed, but the sofa has cat scratches on it, on each leg, like these little authentic details that he was really obsessed with. There's like we photographed a lot of things in each person's house, and there was all of these old tapes of Grateful Dead music mixes. I don't know if anybody caught that, but there's these amazing attention to detail and layers. I just feel like layers bring so much, and he's so great with layers. And also knowing, another thing that when I'm teaching at AFI, I tell my students, you know, if you go into a room and you're shooting on four white walls, it's just going to be so hard to make your scene shine, You're just going in with some strikes against you. So finding really interesting architectural locations, and that's what Paige was really obsessed with. It was constantly like, no, this is not good enough. We have to keep looking, keep looking. I'm thinking of Christopher Lloyd's house. It was so odd looking, and it had such amazing angles, and it was so fun to shoot in because you had so many great surface divisions and ways to break up the frame, and he was really committed to that.
All right, let's expand this to include you guys. Who wants to jump in? Yes.
I thank you. That was great. I absolutely love the ending, and I was wondering, was that written in or was that organic? And what did you tell them to get that like essence of like their soul at the end?
What ending are you talking about?
Okay,
Sorry.
so the one that we just it's like everyone is in the frame,
Oh,
like the
yeah.
smiles, and it just
Yeah.
seemed like that was like so them and so organic.
Yeah.
And I was like, did you write that? Because that's, I mean, you obviously wrote the
I
movie,
didn't
but
write
yeah.
that, but
Okay.
I thank you.
Yeah.
You know, we started doing, I knew that I wanted to open the movie with animal portraits. And so we were shooting all these kind of amazing animal portraits. And I thought, I should do these with the humans too. And so as we went along shooting, I would just pull people aside and I would just get their portrait and we would just talk. I would just talk to the actors for probably about 5 or 6 minutes and just shoot them. And we'd say different things to get them to laugh. And I'd be talking to them and then I'd say nothing. And at certain points, they would show me who they were. And then I'd say, okay, I got it. That was the moment right there. Like Peter Fonda when he like laughed and he tilts his head back. And there were moments where I instantly knew, it was just, they're kind of beautiful human moments. And then I fell in love with them and I wanted to end with them as well. So.
It was gorgeous, so
Oh,
yeah,
thank
I
you.
love it.
The fellow who played Christopher Lloyd's son,
Yes.
is he really a CP?
Yes, yes, yeah. That was very important to me. It was, based on a real man, Jed, who has CP, and it was very important to me to find an actor that really did have CP to play the role. And what's really cool is an actor named Haldor. He actually had never acted before. He's a lawyer, and he works with families to support families with that have members of their family with CP in them when the parents die, to lay out what their future plan is going to look like to be taken care of. So he was just a really, really interesting man. So smart, so game. He just stepped onto the set with Christopher Plummer the first day and was like, "All right, let's do this." It was so crazy. I was nervous for him. I was probably more nervous for him, but he was just totally natural.
And that's a quality of also of Christopher's character that is so endearing. Has he's got so much warmth
Yeah.
for all of these other people. I'm curious to know what inspired having that quality. Throughout with all the different people that they come across.
Well, I think I learned so much about my dad by his weird friends. I mean, they're just, my dad he was friends with everybody. He saw good in everybody, even criminals who most people would be frightened of. And I grew up around criminals. My father was in prison, my brothers were in prison, all of his friends were in prison. And so I always think I'd be horrible on a jury. They'd never let me on a jury because I'd be so sympathetic to criminals that, or maybe I should be on a jury. I don't know. But I just wrote about his warmth, and I'm glad that came across. And I think meeting Christopher Plummer, he is such a warm man, and he's so generous that was really easy to find.
You know, I thought was interesting. I always think in terms of a metaphor. And, in this case, I'm looking at the animals in here. I'm a dog person myself.
Great.
Not multiple dogs, but a dog person. And in this case, I look at all of us and I see in some way or another we all are strays in one way or another. And it was almost a mirror because in the end you have the strays all coming together. But I'm fascinated by what you say about your family, everybody being in jail, all this disarray of the strays coming in from different places in the movie.
Yeah.
And the metaphor seems to fit, because at the beginning I was going to ask you, why did you bring all the animals into this movie? And now they're kind of a mirror.
Sorry, we should just repeat some of that for the people on the other side of the room. He's saying that the collection of stray animals is sort of a metaphor reflecting the human beings, generally speaking, but also specifically in this movie as being sort of strays that come together.
We're all looking for our place, and we're all a little bit lost. And we see somebody who's lost, and yeah.
Well, that's really lovely, and I wish that I could say that was all on purpose, but it wasn't. You probably just figured out why I made this movie. But I love that, and
Well,
that makes
metaphors are
sense.
never on purpose. They're
What?
often accidental.
Yeah.
They always break down.
Yeah,
Yes, it's good though. I love it.
thank you.
The part about the souls.
Yeah.
So I was already laughing with the first picture before I even saw the first picture because
Yeah.
I knew what was coming.
Okay.
So I was always interested when he was going to show the drawing.
Yeah.
How much of that was part of revealing something besides, to the next page? I mean, there was the laughter, but then there was other parts. I'm just curious.
Well, I think that's more like animals to me. I mean, I always feel like my dogs are the best judges of characters. And so I just kind of gave that quality to Henry, that he could kind of see, just like a dog or a cat, what someone's soul was really like. And Vera's character for me just surrounded herself with people that really weren't worthy of her, and I love that Henry could see that and he made that observation right off the bat. So yeah, while it was meant to be comical, I think it says more about Henry and that he is kind of animal-like and that he can really sense someone's soul.
Was the artwork inspired by Robert Crumb?
Oh yeah, I mean I have a Robert Crumb book. I love his work. I guess you don't.
His artwork is astounding and very ugly.
Yeah,
You know?
yeah.
And who actually did the artwork?
I'm so sorry, I do not remember his name. He was just a local artist from Vancouver, and
The next Robert Crumb.
yeah, exactly. We'll call him that.
Oh yeah.
Speaking of artwork, the painting of the dog carrying its puppy
Yeah.
across the river, was that found or was that?
My sister has that painting. Yes. And I was so nervous about when my sister was going to watch this movie because I was kind of telling her, like, it's not really about you. I mean, it's not totally you. It's just inspired by a lot of it is me. And I was thinking, like, that line was her exactly when she called me. She used to work at Trader Joe's. She called me and she said, Shana, oh my God. I just found, my colleagues were going through the dumpster, which is always weird, and they found the most amazing picture of a mother dog crossing a stream with a pup in her mouth, and they said, Tony's totally gonna want this. And I saw it and I was like, yeah, I do. And now it's up in her house, this painting, which was so amazing.
I'm
Got to
sure
create it.
your sister, will be very thankful because you cast I love Kristen.
All so amazing.
She can really own that dialogue.
Yeah, totally. I know. Who else could pull that off? That dialogue is so strange. Yeah.
Is there a question over here? I missed one. Okay, so tell us how we can support the film. When does it open?
It opens June 22nd,
And where in town?
just in LA and in New York, and then hopefully we'll expand wider as we go.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for coming and sharing all of this with
Thank you.
us.
Thank you very much.